Okay, glad to see you guys in person. You guys don't know, but yeah, we usually rehearsal, so we know each other by Zoom. We're Zoom friends. Zoom friends, yeah. Okay, let's get this going. So the idea here is to talk about Web3 AI. I'm actually an entrepreneur and founder of a tech company. So I sell this thing, I produce this thing. So it's going to be great to see and understand the side of your business on it. Uh, so let's start with a quick introduction. And at the same time, I would love to hear you guys talking a little bit about challenges and things that are happening in your business. So I'd like to start with Ashley. Uh, Ashley told us that KFC has set a very ambitious goal of becoming 100% digital by 2025. And I'm very curious to understand what does that mean for a fast food business?
But if you think about fast food, it really is the core of fast food has always been on three major tenets, and that's taste. It has to taste good, convenience, and value. And that's what has defined the industry forever. But as you think about bringing in these new generations of digital native customers into the brand, it does still have to taste good. There are some enhancements we have to do there, but the way that they define convenience and value is very different than how we've historically defined it. And right now the app, it becomes our number one store. So especially being in a highly franchised business like we are at KFC, we're in 145 countries. We have over 27,000 restaurants, and but what is consistent across all of those countries is that the new generation of customers, they prefer to order digitally, whether that's kiosk, whether that's through the app. And so we have to meet that customer expectation and continue to not just meet them, but surpass them. So it's a good thing for our ambition is definitely customer centric, but it's also business centric, because what we find is that digital orders, no matter which channel that they come through, are better for business, not only in the short term, but of course in the long term in terms of how we gather customer data and then use that to become more relevant to them.
And very interesting what you said. It's so even though I work with tech, I'm going to pull this conversation on a lot towards customer value, because in the end of the day, we're here to serve our customers with our brands, right? And it's interesting that you said that the perceived value is not only at the core of food and flavor. So customers' perceived values also across all the other things you can serve them with, and that includes the convenience and the digital experience and so on and so forth. And that's influencing a lot of their decision today. So it's part of the value set that you're considering, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's monetary value, which is how in QSR we've historically defined value. But now value is being defined in a lot of different ways. They value what we stand for as a brand. They value that they can order any and every way that they want, whether that's delivery, whether that's pickup, whether that's through third parties integrated into gaming. They value that kind of accessibility. But then they also value things like rewards and loyalty and being able to get a little something extra for their purchase in return for the data exchange that they know, because they're very cognizant of it, that they are providing us with.
Amazing. So let's move to Helm Boots and Brooks. Welcome, Brooks. So I know that you guys produce like great boots, shoes, and sneakers, and you've been selling a lot. And you guys took a different path through storytelling and telling very compelling stories about your customers. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to just we're a smaller business, of course, certainly than I don't know if that I don't know if everybody realized that, but Helm Boots is not as big as Verizon or KFC. But we have that kind of advantage of being more agile. And so when you talk about Web3 and AI and the ability to kind of tinker and test, that's been something that we've really enjoyed. So you think about all of the different things that we're able to implement and plug in for a month, and then gauge, does it work? Is it something that's providing value? And then from like a Web3 perspective, we can be a little bit more Wild West about it, right? It's a very it's a very meme foundational sort of thing. And then you get into like the tokenization of the economics of it all and how it's transferable and how it can become ubiquitous beyond just Helm boots. Then it becomes kind of the world is our oyster. Now, it needs to be a more better regulated oyster. I think we all would agree from a Web3 perspective. But just for us, on we're at the end of the day, we're selling a physical product, but there's a lot of different digital ways that we can do that in terms of collectibles, in terms of how we evolve our loyalty program to be more experiential. Not to get super nerdy about it, all this is the whole premise of the panel, but how we stamp it on the blockchain and then have some level of immutability to it. And then how that value can grow for people, not just ones who are buying our boots, shoes, or sneakers, but they might just be fans of the concepts. They might just be fans in the digital realm. And I think that is something that every company needs to be thinking about, which is don't just think about your core use case in the current day, in the current state, but think about it in terms of, okay, if you lived in the internet, who would you want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up in the internet?
Great. And from a consumer perspective, size doesn't matter because because we're all living in the we're all living in this era. I love to say this among startups is that we're living in this era where brains are there for everyone to hire. Like, doesn't matter the size of the company. We have all access to the same capital, and we all have access to the same technology. So it's amazing to see how you can, despite of the size of your company, play the same game as the biggest ones. And that's why usually smaller companies, they can grow really, really fast and become disruptive. Amazing. So let's go to Verizon. Verizon Wireless is innovating in the realm of mobile marketing and social commerce. Can we elaborate on that as well?
Sure. I mean, being a cell phone company, of course, mobile marketing is the crux, and our app is, become very important in recent years. And post-COVID, when we saw, retail stores were like shut down, and the only place where folks could come is either your website or your app. So our app became the central focus of all sorts of communication, including store alerts and messaging to our customers. So mobile is definitely an important priority for us.
Okay. So one thing that I would love to establish here is kind of a baseline on customer value. That's what I work with. I've been working with the consumer research my entire career. My background is psychology. Again, even though I work with that company, like people for me is everything. And when we're talking about Web3 AI, in the end of the day, all these technologies, they're being created to serve people, to make sure that we're serving them with better value so they exchange with us, so they can buy from us and they can be loyal to us. So I know that customer experience is kind of a buzzword and everybody's talking about customer experience, but customer experience can be truly meaningless if you're not delivering the value customers are expecting. So customer experience basically goes from everything you're doing, from your brand and advertising to your store operations, store cleanliness. But customer value is what's actually triggering the behavior, are the things that your customers are perceiving on everything you're doing that actually triggers behavior of loyalty and sales. So when we speak from now on from customer value, we should keep that in mind. And when we speak about technology, we should keep that in mind, that technology is not for every company in the same way, because it's not for every customer in the same way, right? So let's start with ChatGPT and OpenAI. I guess everybody nowadays have an opinion about that. I guess everybody has already interacted with that. And we have AI and the generative, for me, it's hard to say generative AI coming into search engines like Bing and now Google. And that it's likely to cause a disruption in the search world and in the advertising world that nowadays is a very, very mature world. So how might generative AI reshape the search advertising market? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be super transformative, and I honestly think it already has. I mean, the reality is we're living in an AI world when it comes to search already. This is just more powerful. And, when I think about Chat GPT, you think working in digital and technology, I was one of the first people to kind of jump on. But I didn't really see much value for it until someone in one of my Facebook groups said, did you know you can ask Chat GPT to do a meal plan for you of all Trader Joe's items with a budget under $200? And I was like, no way. It's true. You can. And so now I'm like, maybe I can do that for all of my meal planning. That just saved me like an hour every week. So that's when you think about customer value, like that's how we have to think of using these technologies. What are the friction points our customers currently have with our brand? And how do we use the technology to ease those friction points and do that at scale? And I think that's really hard when it comes to search for a brand like QSR because we're an impulse category, especially KFC. I mean, we are a very indulgent category. We are the king of treats. Like when you want something juicy, crunchy, like you want a fried chicken sandwich, you want a fried chicken sandwich. We are not something I would imagine Boots are a little bit more of a pre-planned purchase. You probably have a lot of questions about the quality, about the price, the durability.
Size.
Are you going to have blisters the first time you wear them? You don't have a lot of questions about your fried chicken sandwich. But you do want to know how you can get it and how you can get it the fastest. And so for us to be able to take advantage of those types of questions that customers have for our brand, it requires a lot of data integration with how our store operations, linking with our e-commerce so that we are thinking about that entire customer journey from end to end based on the questions we know they're going to ask, and ensure that we're not and that we're supplying the machine algorithms with the proper data sets that will actually not cause more friction, but actually ease that friction and allow them to get our food as quickly as possible to satisfy that hunger.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a kind of an open question, and you raise your hand between the three of you who wants to answer this. It's gonna be kind of a different one. So generative AI, as we're getting into it, we noticed that, for example, for search engines, is not doing what Google used to do, which is to offer us websites for us to go in and search what we want and read what we want and separate the wheat from the chaff based on our goals and the things we're searching, right? Chat GPT and the other generative AI, they're also bringing their opinions to the table, kind of, right? Their recommendations to the table. And with that, we can see biases coming towards that. And that could totally influence brands. It really depends on how the AI is being trained based on the data set of the users. They're using it. So the question here is, what are some of the concerns you guys are foreseeing or anticipating for AI-enabled search, and how do you think that, what are those, and how they could impact your brands and your strategies coming forward?
Yeah, I can take that. So I think you were answering. So you're talking to the box, right? And you're asking the box a question, right? And it spits out you an answer. And you have to pay for it. It's not free. So when was the last time you guys did a search and you actually paid for it? $30 a month. That's what a generative AI premium model you have to pay per month. That's like cost of, almost like Adobe Creative Cloud per month, right? So customers are not just used to it, paying for that. The search terms, and like, let's say you're planning a trip to Barcelona. You ask, okay, give me a trip for Barcelona for 7 days. It's going to spit it out. So now think about where the ads could be placed. And it takes around 10 seconds to 30 seconds to pull that information for you. When was the last time you actually waited for the search results to show up, right? That's one question. Second is the context. How will those search ads be placed in that transaction of you're waiting 10 seconds to 30 seconds? What's that UI would look like, right? How are you going to react to it? That's number one. And second, the results that are coming, how trustworthy they are. That's number one. What's the source? If you ask that, ChatGPT, 200,000 websites. I mean, you ask, can you list it? No, that's not possible. So trust, can you rely on that data? And if you ask the same question over and over again, you will be surprised that results are different each time. So again, as you are saying, the bias that comes into picture.
Yeah, and for a company like yours, I guess it's a big challenge because a consumer can go there and say, hey, what's the most reliable network? and it's going to show your ad, but maybe the answer is going to start like talking about other competitors, right? Or what's the best price? Oh, considering whatever the budget you have, you should go with this one. And maybe the data that AI is using, it's not current because it depends on how it was trained.
Yeah, I was going to interject really quickly because I think it's a very important point to bring up is that the average user isn't paying that $30 a month. They're using the basic level of ChatGPT.
How reliable is that data?
And it's
out, right?
not, and that's
Bing is free. Bing is
yeah,
free.
right. So if you're doing it through Bing, it is free. But I think that the variance in different AI models and data sets, whether you're going to Bard or going to Bing or going to ChatGPT or using Claude by Anthropic or whatever. By the way, if you're from a marketer perspective, I think if you got Slack, go put Claude as an app in your Slack. It's a really helpful tool. If you don't pay for any of it, just a pro tip, maybe not a pro tip, amateur tip. But the point being, I do think that there is right now, from a marketer perspective, an advantage that we have if you are learning about the different types of, like if it's OpenAI 4 versus 3.5, and you're able to go, or you've got plugins, or you've got access to the API through that sort of developer network, that there are current first mover advantages that you can have. Again, for you guys, probably more of an incubator type of situation. I can roll it out to the masses. But I do think right now there is a first mover mentality, and you can also emulate a lot of those things to see. I know there is variance based on what kind of strings you're putting in. I think prompt engineering is a huge part of that. It's apart from the customer because it's going to be super basic. And if you're going to go and engineer it from a marketing perspective, you're going to want to put a lot more thought into it. And there are plenty of courses you can take online to learn more about the logic. But I think right now that's the biggest thing that you can do to gain a step ahead of everybody else.
So we're moving from a generation of search engine optimization (SEO) to search bias optimization or search training optimization.
I think so. For the more traditional marketers in the room that maybe understood half of what Brooks just said, no, that's okay. That's okay. But I think that's important, right? Because I just finished this book called The Digital Mindset, and the premise of the book is that you really only need to know 30% of how do we use data, how these algorithms are constructed to actually be dangerous and effective in this space. And it's meant for people like traditional marketers where like, I don't know what to do with GBT and all of this. And there's a chapter in there where it talks about how these algorithms are built. And you need to understand how to talk to machines. And the up and coming generation already knows that. They know how to talk to machines because they've been doing it. I mean, my kid is 2 and he knows how to talk to Alexa and ask her to turn the lights off. So I think that for us as marketers, we need to understand those algorithms, how they're built, where they're sourcing from, and then that determines our marketing strategies. Because if I know that a lot of people are asking who has the best fried chicken sandwich, and I know where it's pulling from, then my marketing strategy is to influence those sources, and I want to do taste tests with those different sources. And can I influence whether or not we win? No, but I have faith in the product. I have faith in the delivery that we've won in the past. I think we can. And so I think from a marketing strategy standpoint, that's a really good first place to start. To Brooks's point, is understanding how these algorithms are constructed, where they're pulling from, how they are formulating their logic, and then building marketing strategies to then influence those sources.
I like, Brooke, when he said that prompt engineering, I mean, that's if you are not a good prompt engineer, you cannot produce an output. But again, output, who owns that? Let's say you spend like an hour on Mid-Journey, you come out with a content. Who owns that content? Is it you? I mean, we have seen, so much bias already happening. And then, from New York Times to Wall Street Journal, they're all, hey, don't use LLMs on our platform because it's behind a paywall. But now, these crawlers, they're going out, they're extracting the information and giving you one short answer. So again, who owns that content? Is paywall content. And there's like so many ifs and buts. And all this thing is like, when were we? Like November, this was announced? 6 months, guys. I mean, is it going to solve all the problems of human race? That's what generative AI is talking like that.
Yeah, but I think also what a year ago we thought, NFTs and the metaverse were going to change everything. And now, crypto's crashed.
Cryptos crash.
So, like, to your point, if they're going to put restrictions around AI, like, they might take it off the market in 6 months. So, I think to Brooks's earlier point, if you're a smaller brand or you're a more nimble brand and you might have some flexibility to do some crazy things, because why not? Like, if you're doing some guerrilla marketing, like, actually try and shake things up. But when you are a large established brand, you have less flexibility to do that. And when you have you're responsible for moving the needle across the world, you have to be very purposeful about where you spend your time and your resources. And so I think, for us, we have this framework at our global center of excellence where, half of our time needs to be spent on delivering capability in our markets to deliver the business every day. We have fundamental capabilities and foundational technologies that we need to deploy and get out there. All of that will enable us to do all of this stuff in the future, whatever rises to the top. But then maybe we spend about 20% of our time actually thinking about, okay, what are those known solutions? But then we don't really know what the customer problem is to solve yet. And that's where we explore. So I think having a good framework to understand when, where, how, and why to tackle some of these buzzy things that are happening based on where you are in your, business maturity is really important.
And one thing that it's interesting about what you said is that actually for bigger brands, size matters when it comes to AI, because even if you build a team to try to influence what's going on at the source, because you have so many more users talking about your business and writing articles and producing content that will ultimately train the AIs. It's kind of you're trying to fight against something that it's a lot stronger. So if your brand do something that it's really negative and hit the news, that will bias the AI immediately on the next day, and it's going to take a while for you to be able to fix that image. So you're going to need a lot more PR to produce more content out there to re-influence the source, so you can, right? So interesting. So challenging times are coming. Okay, so make sure you're always delivering value and not hitting the news with anything negative, because that's going to be hurtful.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, for sure, for sure. Okay, so let's move forward to another topic. New tech isn't for everyone. And again, I see a lot of companies thinking about new tech as a playbook. Oh, everybody's is going for AI, let's go for AI. Oh, everybody went for digitization, let's go for digitization. And it shouldn't be about that, right? It should be, again, all these technologies, they should be serving customers and should be serving customer value. And if it is, okay, let's do it. So at Worthix, we're very obsessed with the concept of transient advantage, which is basically you have to launch new strategic initiatives again and again and again, but you have to do it for specific arenas. So nowadays, it's almost impossible, even for big brands, to become the category king, like to become the category king for the whole industry. So basically, the recommended way of operating is like you separate different arenas and you try to become the king of those arenas. But again, those arenas are basically customers with jobs to be done. And if you don't understand what they value, it's really, really hard to serve them. So if we're thinking about serving them with technology, first we need to understand what they value and what they want. So my question when it comes to technology is, first of all, what's your arena? And second, how do you decide the strategic investments when it comes to technology? Which ones you're going to choose and which ones you're going to drop? So let's start. Do you want to start? Like, how do you define your arenas? And
I think, while we were prepping, we were talking about coming out of like post-COVID, right? I will give you a great example. So, Super Bowl 55 happening in Tampa, right? City restrictions. You cannot have more than 25,000 people in the stadium. You could have only 30,000 cutouts. Remember that Super Bowl in Tampa, right? So now imagine a scenario where it's the least attended Super Bowl in the history. So how Verizon as a brand converts that into a least attended football game into a maximum attendance event. So we then resorted to, which is called Metaverse, right? So again, giving a situation example. So we created a 5G super stadium app built into Fortnite creative mode with our agency Beyond Creative, and we partnered with gaming companies, And then the real replica of that stadium was created in Fortnite. We worked with pro gamers. We worked with actual NFL players. We had their memes created, avatars created. And guess what? This website, or I would say this app, drove 40 million hits. We had 3 million streaming sessions and almost 4 billion impressions. So here is a scenario, a challenge, a lowest attendance game converted into 40 million hits to our app.
And that's a great example of focusing on customer value and getting the best technology you can to deliver value and maximize the potential.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, situational, right? And did we continue? No, we did not do anything after that, right? So that shows the fact now. And again, I think you mentioned crypto's crashed, NFT, there's no value, right? Somebody, good luck, bought Jack Dorsey's, first tweet, right, for $3 million. Guess what's the value now? They were all the hype and rage 2 years ago. Even Taco Bell was selling an NFT for $500. I don't know if anybody bought it or not, but
Yes, people bought it.
Okay. But I mean, that's all hype. It's gone down, and now we are talking about Web3. And if you saw Apple's announcement yesterday, they did not even mention the word VR at all in their entire 40-minute product introduction. They did not talk about artificial intelligence in their entire demo.
You have the framework, right? The Yum brand framework.
Yeah, well, and I think I would say the Yum brand framework because it depends. I think the framework needs to shift depending on what industry you're in, what business you're leading. But Abhi makes a really great point. It's not, hey, how is my brand going to enter the metaverse? It's what is the business or customer problem I'm trying to solve, and can this new technology help me solve it? And so what the framework that we use as a digital and technology organization at KFC Global Center of Excellence is that, is it a known or unknown customer problem to solve? And is there a known or unknown capability or solution already in place? And so we need to be spending 50% of our time on that known unknown portion of the matrix, 20% of our time in the unknown knowns, and then the unknown, maybe 10% of our time, it's just like, hey, let's let go and let someone else, like Starbucks, test it out. And then we'll just see if it crashes. And I say that because I used to work for Starbucks and I used to run the Starbucks rewards team. But that matrix looks different for Starbucks rewards because when we were a leader, we launched gamification. We were the first to launch order ahead. We were the first to launch personalization and mass games. And so that matrix looked different for us there because we want to continue that leadership. And so that unknown portion is a lot bigger than 10% in terms of where we would spend our time. And so I think you need to understand for your business and the size, the maturity that you're at within the market and within the capabilities of your teams executing what that looks like for you and have a framework to make those decisions so that you don't get into this black hole sucking up time, resources, and capital into something that might not be here or might not be relevant in a year.
And Brooks, what about you? Because you probably have more freedom to try new things and
yeah, but we're also restricted because we're not dealing with quite as large of budgets. So it's got to be more pragmatic, right? So if we're doing it, it's like you were in a Shopify e-commerce store, basically over the last 4 years, it used to be entirely retail, brick and mortar. And so the conversion to a D2C brand that, I've only been there less than a year, so I can't really speak to the history of it other than to say that the just emergence of the Shopify landscape from an app perspective and the ease of plugging in and unplugging, I think is a huge advantage for us. And it speaks to kind of the conversation that we had initially getting into the panel, which is that allows us to be more agile. And so the arena for us is try and fail. If you succeed, maybe hit the gas a little bit or figure out where that works. And relative to AI right now, it's how can I be more efficient? Using ChatGPT as a muse or as a builder of frameworks, whether it's a TJ's grocery store list or an actual just like, hey, we're going to go and consolidate office into our retail store, and we're going to start doing shop nights. So let's kind of just like spit what the criteria is, get a framework, and then go and of course iterate upon that, because you should never, ever, ever, ever just take it verbatim and cut and paste. It's not reliable enough. But then my hopefulness, and I'm future casting here, is that the generative agency component to this, where you now have AI starting to read and write, becomes immensely valuable to me, because I'm able to go and take very rudimentary tasks and train it to what I want it to do, while also cross-referencing it with what everyone else out in the world is doing, according to however agile it is or however recent it is combing through the great unknown of the internet. And then I'm able to go and do other things while it's going and generatively, writing and then suggesting the things to me to go and actually execute and approve. I do think that world will come. I think it's probably a GPT-5 type of scenario. And it's relatively, obviously, there are other AI solutions out there that might have it as well. But I do think that world is going to come about, and it's going to be a lot quicker than everyone thinks.
Okay. Do we still have time? 5 minutes? Okay, so let's go to the last topic, and I'm going to only ask maybe one question about this one. So trust and transparency, okay? Web3 aims to empower individuals and give them more control over their digital assets, agreements, and identities, fostering more autonomy and ownership. However, AI is still very opaque in its ethical and societal implications. So, in your opinion, how can decentralized technologies like blockchain contribute to building trust in digital transactions and interactions? So let's talk a little bit about trust in this new era.
I mean, I think simply from a blockchain perspective, from a safety of your identity, the being able to connect your identity across multiple companies and multiple rewards programs, there is some safety in that. But then I also think there's also a lot of opportunity, and it actually enables companies to be able to provide more value, because the exchange of goods and the exchange of rewards is going to become a lot easier on the blockchain. And then customers will trust that exchange much more than they do in the manual way in which we do it today, which is to upload a coupon code and like send it out. Like it's all, super a lot more manual. So I think from a trust standpoint, the blockchain has a lot of advantages that are going to transform the way loyalty and rewards look in the future. And then from a generative AI standpoint, I think the way I think about it is I trust it as much as I trust my absolute smartest friend on a topic. Like I'm going to take their advice, but then I'm also going to use my own intuition to gut check of like, yeah, that sounds okay, or yeah, I'll take it. Or so I think that, because you don't know the sources it's pulling from. You can ask, but it's like, oh, there's over 200,000 websites. So, I think that but I think that's just, we still have to use our intuition and our gut, just like we do with any other piece of information or advice that we receive, whether it's, a news article or a piece of research that we get. There's still some sort of own judgment from our own experience and our own knowledge that we need to put against it. And that's the same way in which I think customers need to approach how they trust generative AI.
Want to touch on actually is, you brought up a good point that, blockchain is built on transparency, right? Everything is transparent. You can see how the flow of information is taking place. I want to give you a scenario for everybody to think, right? So imagine, there's a blockchain, Instagram or Twitter, right? Everything clear. You can see what's happening. And now you are an influencer. You are posting on Instagram. And as an influencer, you post, and the advertiser agrees, it opens up a public escrow account, and now you decide there's a smart contract, again, running on blockchain, transparency, everything, right? And there's a commitment that, okay, if X number of people sees the ad, you will be paid X dollars. Full transparency, all lanes clear. And then you as a brand, you have full transparency. Who is seeing the ad? How many clicks and impressions? And there is no need to run, your Google Analytics snapshots, putting your screenshots on your presentation. Everything's free flow. Yes, who would love this scenario? Brands, right? Who would not like this to happen? I'll leave it that.
I mean, I echo what y'all both said. I think that there is a blockchain, and I think it's worth noting that yeah, there's a huge NFT crash. I mean, there was always an inflated market and a huge grift, but the tokenization. I mean, if the NFTs are just tokens in image format, and with contracts or underpinning their utility, still very much believe in that utility. The contracts, and again, it you can bet on different horses in terms of like cryptocurrency, Ethereum, whatever. Like I don't even want to like put that into the equation. It's more about like the utility of it and the future state of it. Relative to brand safety, I do think that there is an immense value in terms of knowing what the source is from a brand on whatever blockchain they choose to participate in or build their own or whatever, to be able to verify a set of like there is truly a single source of truth then that becomes reinstated because the brand itself is able to be more fortified in the transparency of it comes from us because this, and especially so when we're in the age of the check mark dying, we're kind of like shifting in terms of its value and this maybe that's appropriate, but when it comes to trust and transparency, the previously extremely relied upon thing. We did news hits where I talked about which they would check. Now it's like, well, I don't know that say the same thing now. you know?
Like, how does the Section 360 of GDPR applies to generative AI, chat GPT? I mean, nobody knows.
I promised that I was going to pull that back to people. I'm going to leave the audience with kind of a provocative food for thought that I want to transform into a question. And for sake of time, let's try to answer it as short as possible, as a yes or no as possible, because I think it's nobody has the answers for us to think as brands. So the other day I was talking to Jean, the CMO at Zappos, and she was telling me how during her interview process, it took like 2 or 3 interviews where they were only asking her about things related to her personality and her cultural fit. Try to understand if she was going to be the person to lead the brand and the brand values. And she said that that's something that they do with everybody. And then after like 2 or 3 interviews, they decide, usually that's when they start asking about the specific skills. And you're saying that your son or your daughter, sorry, your baby
Son.
was
Yeah,
your
two
son,
boys.
yeah, was interacting with Alexa. So our brands, even though we decide what they're going to look like and what they're going to be offering to the market in terms of attributes and value, it's a lot of it has to do with how our people at stores, they're dealing with the customers, how they're behaving. So the question here is, a lot of companies, they put a lot of effort to make sure that those people are trained with your brand values to transfer those values. But now we're getting to an era where we have chatbots. They're going to become smarter and smarter and smarter. Do you think that in the near future, those chatbots are going to be able to replicate cultural values as you're helping customers through your digital channels? And is that going to make it easier or harder than training humans and having humans in the front line delivering those values?
Yes, I do. I think they'll be able to replicate that. And actually, I think it'll be easier because you're training one chatbot. And for an industry like ours, where we have a really high turnover, you're constantly training new people and you're training, 16, 17-year-olds. So that may or may not listen to you, just like my son may or may not listen to me on occasion. So yeah, yes, and I think it'll be easier.
I think it'll be easier. I think on the employment side and the employer side of things, I think that there's a world where the co-piloting becomes more common. So it's not just your, specifically chatbot in terms of the traditional sense of a virtual assistant. I think there's internal virtual assistants that will start to spring up where you're going cross-referencing information that has been trained, so it does have a tone and a brand style guide and set of guidelines and brand values that are more of a check and balance.
That's a tough one. I mean, literally, you have the ability now to train and use a LLM to make your entire website into a box. Think about, I mean, let's go to AT&T.com or Verizon.com. It's just a box. You know, there are no graphics, no images. You just come in and you ask a question. We have trained that LLM, and it knows all the data. It knows your customer history, purchase history, and you just talking to the phone. Now, I mean, where does content marketing fit in? I mean, there are a lot of questions, we have to think before we just jump on that ship. So I will be very skeptical. I will be very, very agile also.
Okay, I guess we're way beyond. Yeah.
Can I just add though, I do not think it should replace humans.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Like, there is
what I heard.
I think it's just we redeploy like labor and humans to create a closer connection and bond with customers, as opposed to having to do the functional work of customer service or taking orders. The chatbots can do that, and then we redeploy the labor to actually doing what they actually enjoy doing. And for us, that's like hand breading chicken. That's actually interacting with customers and smiling at them. And
yes.
So I think we think about the human interaction differently than the functional nature in which they're forced to do that today.
Perfect. Question?
It's also a two-way street because it's also about how that talk about customer value. The search engine probably wants it to learn more about that user over time or speak in a way that's more understandable that the user can comprehend and understand more. And so there is a little bit of a delicate balance there. I mean, we're clearly not going to be at Phone Boots leading that charge in terms of, throw our weight around and send them some shoes. But I do think that there will be things that come to a head that are going to require some more weighty, difficult discussions. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. But you're overlaying linguistics. Yeah. It's an interesting
I
question.
think it becomes like a marketing ethics issue, and
Loving this panel.
I think I think it's is if we had definitive proof that something like generative AI or this search was harming customers in some way, that it was slanting issues. I mean, I think then businesses would rally and come together to do something about it. But I think right now it's kind of a wait and see approach. I think as businesses, we have a value, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're maintaining the trust of our customers. So like I wouldn't recommend trying to influence the slant of how my brand is showing up in that space, because the whole foundation of that space is around trust and transparency. And that's why customers are accepting of it, because they think it's objective. And so for us to try and influence that objectivity, for me, seems ethically wrong from a marketing standpoint. And so, in terms of like withholding dollars to try and get them to change any sort of like security or measures or algorithms, I think brands have shown the ability to do that in the past when it is proven to actually be harmful to people. And that's when those conversations should happen.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.